back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today is Friday, January 22nd, 2016, and we are bringing you a special Ed Morrissey Show partnership with LifeSiteNews, LifeSiteNews.com, who is going to be telling us, four people are going to be telling us all about the March for Life today, the status of the pro-life movement, and sort of try to bring you up to speed on all of the goings-on around this country and in Canada, because our first guest is Leanne Lawrence, LifeSite News' correspondent in Canada, who is going to talk to us a little bit today about some of the analogs between what happens here in the U.S. and what happens in Canada. Leanne, welcome to the show. Great to talk to you.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here, Ed. Thanks.
So what are some of the analogs between here in Canada? Because honestly, most of us are probably so caught up in the fight over abortion here in the United States that I'm not clear as to what the status is on abortion in Canada, whether there is a March for Life. I believe there is in Canada, and what the what the big events in that fight are. So, Leanne, I mean, you're going to have to school me on this.
Well, I'll do my best. Our March for Life is in May. That's because it was on May 14th in 1969 that Canada legalized abortion, and we did it. It was the Catholic Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau, and his son is now presently the Prime Minister of Canada, just elected in October of this year, or I guess that was 2015. Anyway, back in 1969, they passed a law that legalized abortion under certain circumstances. We have health care paid for by the state, and so at the time it was if you could get two doctors to say that it was a medical necessity, a woman could have an abortion in a hospital. Those doctors, it was a therapeutic abortion committee. So that's how it all started in Canada. So we would have a March for Life when the pro-life movement started, very quickly. We would have ours in May. We would be in Ottawa in the nation's capital there. And that law went for many years, but then it was struck down. We got the Charter of Rights, I think, in 1982. So the law was struck down by the Supreme Court. The 9 judges decided that there was a charter right. Well, it wasn't actually a charter right. That's how it's being perceived now by the current Prime Minister, but it was under the Charter. They struck down the law that it didn't recognize the woman's security of persons, and so now we have no law at all.
So it's abortion on demand all the time, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. It's regulated. We're a federation, and so healthcare is under the provincial jurisdiction.
Right.
So it's regulated by the provinces, and so there are still restrictions insofar as it's usually abortions are committed in hospitals. However, now we do have freestanding abortion centers and that sort of thing. And so, yes, really, legally there are no limits. A child is considered a person only when it emerges fully from his mother's womb. So
right up until
kind of a free for all. Pardon me?
So pretty much right up until the time of birth, abortion is legal in Canada. Now,
yes, there's absolutely no legal sanction against it.
See, did we lose? There's an answer.
Abortions are done, but yes.
I thought we lost you there for a moment, but you're back. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's just that there is no law at all, and so I'm not sure where that puts Canada internationally. It's a pretty horrific scenario, and there were a couple of governments, but because they're afraid that if they pass a law, it will go back to the Supreme Court judges, and they'll just say, "Oh, sorry, that doesn't actually hold up under the Constitution or the Charter," and so then a lot of the politicians are simply afraid to put forward a law because they'll say, well, maybe it won't go according to the Charter. And then, of course, now we have Justin Trudeau, as I mentioned. He's the son of the late Pierre Trudeau, who brought in abortion in 1969, and he is absolutely adamant that it is a charter right, even though he's mistaken on that point. And so he's probably the most abortion-minded Prime Minister that we've ever had. So we do have a very grave situation in Canada for sure.
My goodness. Now, Canada has a single-payer healthcare system. Obviously,
Pardon me?
Canada has a single-payer healthcare system, a state-run healthcare system. So, are
Yes.
these are abortions covered by
Yes.
taxpayer dollars? They are. Okay, so they're covered through that system.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, they are. They're usually under. Yeah, it's through the provinces, so it's every provincial healthcare systems. But yes, I would say that all across Canada, the provinces do pay for abortions, whether they're committed in hospitals or now, in the abortion centers.
Now, Leanne, what is the public opinion like in Canada on abortion? Because I know in the United States it has grown progressively more pro-life over the last 20 years or so. Have you seen the same sort of thing happening in Canada, or is it a much different situation than it is in the U.S.?
Well, I don't know from how I see it. I think that Canada, I would say, but this is my opinion, I suppose, that it's a very liberal country, and I think that there is a greater sympathy for abortion, if I could put it that way. I mean, we are so liberal because we're now facing euthanasia. That's been legalized. It's the same. The Supreme Court struck down the prohibition against assisted suicide because that, again, it's a charter right to be able to kill yourself. And so I don't know the statistics about abortion, but it seems to me that we're not as pro-life in general.
That's interesting.
You may have somebody that hopefully will correct me on that.
Well, no, I mean, it's interesting because I do know that from having studied a little bit about Canadian politics and having written about Canadian politics from time to time,
Right.
I know that the political center in Canada is more to the left than it is in the United States.
Yeah.
And I would have to
Yeah.
remind people of that because, the conservatives in the United States really like Stephen Harper. I like Stephen Harper too. And I think, especially on foreign policy, I think they really appreciated Stephen Harper. But people would hear Stephen Harper talk about some things and say, "Oh, this is terrible. He's going over to the dark side," sort of thing. And I'd have to remind them that the Conservative Party in Canada is to the left of the conservative movement in the United States, considerably to the left, but not way to the left. And and people sometimes don't understand. The same thing's true in Great Britain, for that matter, too.
Yes, that's right. Well, I guess, we're probably a little bit closer to Great Britain in many ways than the United States would be.
Yeah.
I have to say that the pro-lifers in Canada, well, again, perhaps I'm speaking for myself, but we really, really appreciate the Americans because, they are so ardent and they fight so hard. And I would say that American pro-lifers are they're just a real inspiration to people all around the world. And especially in Canada, we always look to the Americans for their fight and their just the strength that they have. It's really incredible. And of course, I've just really seen it today with the March for Life. It's just an amazing event, I must say.
Well, and I was just about to ask you that because I wanted to. This is your first March for Life, and you're
Yes, it is.
you're in Washington D.C. and you're in Snowmageddon there, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So, what did you think? What did you think of your first March for Life?
Oh, it's amazing. It's just amazing. People were saying, well, first of all, they were saying, you've got to have lots of gear because it gets really, really cold. And here we are, going to be snowed under, I guess. But they also talked about the exuberance and the spirit. And really, it was incredibly moving.
Well, I think that
Come up the hill.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I think that we've been doing it now for I think ever since Roe v. Wade, and it's just getting bigger and bigger every year. And I think it's really interesting to see that the snow didn't scare them off.
No, it didn't. Although it did have quite an impact. I think a lot of people may be canceled. I'm not up on the figures. You know much better than I what you usually expect for the March for Life. I know I went to the youth rally this morning, and there was a Catholic mass, and I think that they were expecting about 30,000, but it was down to 10,000. So, there are fewer numbers, I guess, because of the snow. But at the same time, it was, people were really enthusiastic, and there were all kinds of things going on, and people, just cheering and that sort of thing. So it was really heartening to see.
Well, and I mean it's that type of turnout that really heartens everybody. And of course, 10,000, even if it's 10,000, that's still nothing to sneeze at. Even if you're expecting 30,000, that's a lot of people to gather in the middle of a blizzard to have a
Well,
rally.
that's just it, yeah, and that's the youth. And I don't know the figures for the Canadian March for Life, but of course we're a much smaller country, well, as far as population goes. So I think we get about 25 to 30,000. But
Wow.
I guess the weather did sort of, maybe scare a few people off. But
Well, it's a big turnout nonetheless. I know that they were closing roads down so people could still march in the snow, and they were doing that later
right.
on. And I mean, I think that just coming out in that kind of weather at all makes a huge statement. I mean, these are people who could very easily be relaxing at home and sipping on the hot apple cider, and instead they're out. And I have to tell you, Leanne, I live in Minnesota, so we're pretty much buried in snow from December to March anyway. But I know it's unusual, and this is a really bad blizzard no matter where you're at that's coming down. I
Yes.
wouldn't be out on the street if I knew that 12 to 36 inches of snow was going to be coming in the next 48 hours. So I mean, I think that really does say something about the commitment that we're seeing out there.
Oh yes, it's amazing. Yeah, it's great. And also, I mean, the enthusiasm. It's really catching. And I think that, as I say, we look to the Americans because they really are I guess, inspirational, just the way that they're going on. And I have heard that also, yes, that you're saying that, pro-life is sort of gaining momentum in the United States.
It is.
So hopefully that will happen in Canada as well. I mean, we're certainly, fighting the good fight and doing what we can.
Well, we're going to give you the help that we can give you. I can tell you that for sure. But Leanne, what was your favorite moment today from what you've seen so far in the March for Life? And we got a couple of minutes, so why don't you give us paint a picture for us of your favorite moment today?
Well, when I was at the youth rally and they have the music, that really catching music, and then there were people dancing and just it was just the exuberance. It was yeah. I'm not easily sort of moved, I guess, the tough reporter, but really it just, I was almost tearing up because it was just so infectious. The people were dancing and clapping and cheering, and, we are for life and we're the pro-life generation, which is another thing. It's like, the young people, it's like, we are going to stop abortion. We're not going to, keep this going on. How can we have, a nation that we don't protect the most innocent and vulnerable in our society? So I think it was probably sort of getting caught up in that really great energy there. That was maybe one of the moments that kind of comes to me. And also just, running, I was trying to be ahead of the march so I could get some Constitution Avenue, I think it is, and up the hill, and
Yep.
then just waiting for the march to come up and just having that sort of sea of people coming towards me. It was just incredible. I thought, man, this is amazing. I think really you could think sometimes, you get a little discouraged, but thinking, yeah, we could maybe we really could stop abortion. Maybe we can do it.
Well, Leanne, you're part of that, and I thank you for touching base with us today. And hopefully, we're going to help fuel the end of abortion here with these marches and protests, and not just here in the United States, but in Canada as well. So, thank you very much for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye. Leanne Lawrence from LifeSiteNews has been my first guest. We're going to go ahead and get on the line here. We'll try to get our next guest, who is Lisa Bourne, and I'm just going to go ahead and get her number going here. Okay, let's do this a different way then. There we go. Didn't want to take that, so we'll do something else. And don't forget, we are partnering today with LifeSite News, LifeSiteNews.com is our partner for today's show, a special show of the Ed Morrissey Show for the March for Life. We're going to be contacting Lisa Bourne, who is 12-year reporter for LifeSite News.
Hello, this is Lisa.
Lisa, hi, this is Ed Morrissey, and you're on the air with the Ed Morrissey Show. How are you today?
I'm fine, Ed. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
So I understand that you were that you spoke from the stage today at the March for Life. Tell us about that.
Well, I appeared on stage.
You appeared on stage.
I didn't speak. Yeah, the rally will have pro-life leaders come up at some point, either at the end or I'm not sure if it's intermingled with the speakers, but I was among that group. I was filling in for our editor-in-chief, John Henry Weston. He would normally have that role, but he is one of the probably many folks that had to leave early today because he's traveling internationally with the storm. He had to head out early. So I got to step into the spokesperson role, and that's why I was up on that stage in front of the crowd. It was very exciting.
You know, and John Henry's been on the show a couple of times, and I met him once. I actually met John Henry in at the Vatican, in the Vatican press office while I was out there on the Synod on the Family, and a great guy.
Of all places.
Of all places, yeah. And so we've had a chance to talk through pro-life issues and Catholic issues a few times, but I'm glad to meet you. And so what was it like being on stage? What was it like to be, how many people did you see out there? Do you think were out there this year?
Well, it's been significantly smaller, I understand. I myself, other than standing up on that stage, did not get to view and witness much of the march because of the role that I was undertaking. I wasn't actually part of the march. As soon as we finished the rally, we had to head off to do something else. So I will say, though, unequivocally, that the crowd is smaller simply because a lot of folks canceled or left early. But still, thousands and thousands at the very least. That would be my best guess.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure the March folks will announce the numbers at some point.
There's a blizzard coming in, so I think we can put an asterisk on the. This is obviously going to be a lower turnout year, but I mean, it's when you've got 36 inches of snow on the way to dump all over you. I mean, I'm from Minnesota. I was just saying this to Leanne Lawrence. I live in Minnesota, but even 36 inches would be a big deal up here. 12 inches would be a big deal up here. So, yeah, no, I don't blame people.
I live in Iowa. So.
Oh, that's right. You live in Iowa, so you're just a little farther to the south of us. You probably get more snow than we do.
No, I think you still top us on that, but I kind of have a running joke. This is my fourth March for Life, my second for LifeSite. The weather has been a factor in one way or another every year. Last year it was mild, but it still did snow at one point, and I think it's funny how it takes very little for our nation's capital to shut down effectively. Now, this year's storm is obviously an exception to that, but those of us from the Midwest, we just kind of look around and go, really?
Yeah, oh, please, come on, man.
It is a testament. All those folks and pilgrims coming from across the country that still make it is just a wonderful testament to life.
All of us Midwesterners look over at the Beltway and go, come on, man. Half inch of snow is gonna lock you up. Come on, man. That's big. We don't even put boots on for that.
Somebody sneezed somewhere. We better shut the schools and the federal government down.
Well, we are hardy folk, we Midwesterners, Lisa, are we not? So
we definitely are.
So you were on EWTN this morning. What were you talking about on EWTN?
Well, I was a guest with Teresa Tomeo, and we just talked about, once you learned that I was also a fellow journalist, we talked a little bit about what it was like to cover the march and then just where things are today with abortion, like what are the big stories. And of course, I would say the story for this year is the Center for Medical Progress, the videos, the undercover videos that have been published, and that is still an ongoing, an unfolding story. There's one or two lawsuits against David Deladen. He's the head of that organization, and that's still unfolding. But that has brought the issue of abortion to the forefront in a way that it's never been before, and it cannot be ignored any longer. So now is not the time to rest on our laurels or be complacent. We need to keep pushing and get this out there because they're scared and they're on the run. So now it's the time to keep going.
And Planned Parenthood filed a lawsuit against Center for Medical Progress. And I'm thinking to myself, be careful what you wish for, because discovery works in both directions. Were you surprised to hear that Planned Parenthood sued CMP over these things? I am wondering, Lisa, one of the key concepts in law in the United States is this: never sue poor people, because the lawyers don't get paid. And
Right.
maybe that's the lawyer's concept. But I mean, what was your reaction to Planned Parenthood's lawsuit against CMP, and what do you think that they're hoping to get out of it?
I think that it was pure audacity on their part. I think that they still, on some level, think that they're invincible. Another event that's in conjunction with the March for Life is the Law of Life Summit, and that took place yesterday, and David Dryden did speak at that as well. And one of the lawyers there said, stuff's coming out in discovery, folks. They can't. It's not about media talking points. They can go out and talk to a sympathetic media and continue to spin things a certain way, but that's not how it's going to play out in a courtroom. So I still think that they think on one level that they're invincible, but they're also scared on another level. So I guess I wasn't surprised, because they will. Look what they did with what was the breast cancer.
Susan G. Komen. Susan G. Komen.
Yeah,
right.
I mean they're predatory. They're gonna. I put nothing past these folks.
Well, I mean, the Komen thing was more of a political thing. I understood the reason for their attack on Komen, which succeeded, by the way. But it succeeded because it very much so. It was wildly successful. They got Komen to back all the way down, but that was a political thing. I mean, they didn't drag Komen into court that I'm aware of. They just made it very difficult for Komen to stand their ground politically. This is, I mean, obviously they weren't going to do that with CMP, because CMP, they're all about making this a political fight, and so they took him into court. And I still don't understand the reason for that. Basically, I would say that they would be much better off letting that sit and just sort of fall into the media disinterest bin. The media is barely covering it anymore anyway. Filing a lawsuit forces everybody to cover it once again, and you run the risk of having a court say, hey, look, these guys didn't do anything wrong, and here's all the raw data, and they didn't misrepresent anything.
Right.
And I'll tell you go ahead, Lisa. I'm sorry.
Like you say, that you brought up the point of whether or not it's political, but it still comes around to why these folks are in business to begin with. It's the almighty dollar.
Oh, yeah.
So whether it's CMP or Susan G. Komen, their cash cow, their coffers were threatened. So they're coming out with the claws out. I mean, it may not be smart that they filed the suit. You and I, conventionalism, are sitting here saying this makes no sense because what you do is indefensible. But the money speaks. Well, follow the trail.
The other thing on this too is that, yeah, I mean, you got to follow the money trail, but they may end up having to force other media outlets to chime in on CMP's side, because basically what they're attacking is the whole investigative, undercover journalism that everybody has done. All the broadcast networks have done it. Maybe CNN hasn't, because I don't know that I've seen that type of thing, but I know the big three have done it. ABC, CBS, and NBC have done it, continue to do it. Use undercover videos to videotape. What was the one thing that came up in Idaho? It was something to do with slaughterhouses. And the state of Idaho had a law that prohibited people from doing that sort of thing, and they're fighting to get that law overturned. But if the basis of the lawsuit, and from what I understand, this is the setup for it, is that they dishonestly represented themselves in these things and were able to get these conversations on tape through deception. Well, the broadcast networks are going to have no choice but to file amicus briefs in support of CMP, because the last thing that they can afford to have happen is for a court to rule that is illegal and that damages will accrue from that.
Well, you're correct, Ed. If they're intellectually honest and looking out for their interests, you'd think that they would, but at the same time, look at the reason for, in each case of the undercover journalism. Is it a politically correct motive, or in the case of the CMP, a correct motive? So, right. I see them being suspiciously quiet simply because You see that all the time in certain cases where, all of a sudden, the environmental folks don't get real upset about birth control hurting the waterways because they don't want to step on somebody else's toes that is of their same mindset. So I have a hard time seeing the media going, oh, yeah, we have to come to these folks' defense, even if it's in their own best interest to function journalistically. I just don't see it.
That's a good point, Lisa. Thank you very much. That is an excellent point. I think the problem with the CMP videos, and this has been my observation all along, the biggest problem for Planned Parenthood with the CMP videos is it shows Planned Parenthood monetizing abortion, the outcomes of abortion, on the basis that these are human beings that are being aborted.
They are alive. Yeah, they're alive. So they're
they
undercutting their own assertion that they're not.
Exactly. They have hearts, they have livers, they have brains. They're not just a clump of undifferentiated cells with no more moral consequence than removing a cyst. These are living human beings that they are killing, and they're marketing their bodies on the basis of the fact that they were living human beings at one point in time. And I think that's the biggest. That was one of the reasons, Lisa, why I was arguing don't talk about the legalities of whether or not they're making money off of this, because talk about the fact that what you're seeing here is the fact that they're exploiting women to get their hands on these on these babies so that they can turn around and give them to researchers on the very based on the truth that exposes the biggest lie of all, which is that these are not human beings. And and I think that eventually that's still going to be the big takeaway from the CMP videos, is that these are human beings, and Planned Parenthood damn well knows it.
Well, and we hope that the point gets made too that they're showing that life has value, but unfortunately for them, it's monetary value, which still comes back around to they're devaluing life.
Right.
So ultimately they've legally undercut themselves because they try to say that this is not a human being or not until it's viable or until whatever. And we know that that's not the case, obviously, you and I, and they've proven that it's not the case if that human being has monetary value because it's a human being in a human life. So you're right, they are undercutting their same purpose for doing things, but it's still devaluing human life, which is unacceptable.
Lisa, we got a couple minutes left. What other stories are you pursuing out there at the March for Life?
Well, there's just so much to cover from the standpoint of the things that take place, which is things like the rally. And last night I was at the opening vigil mass at the Basilica, which is always very, very powerful, whether it's 10,000 people or 20,000 people.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's a low by definition standards a crowd. It's very powerful. But the other thing, every year you can come and just walk up to people and ask them their own story. Why are they here? And invariably, if there's 50,000 people, or as I said, 500,000, you could get that many different stories. And it's, my colleague has said to a lot of folks, Dustin, in the media, and everybody knows this, the pro-life movement is a young movement, but I always like to point out, too, which is part of what gives us hope. Everybody's got a story because everybody has human worth, no matter their age. And I have found some of those fascinating stories of people that are in other certain, not just the kids coming out on buses. That's the beautiful thing. You can walk up to anybody and say, "Why are you here?" And you'd be surprised what you will hear. Somebody told me to abort my child, and they've got the child there, and now they're in middle school, and seeing it on the ground. Or there was one year, this gentleman stood by the side of the road. He wasn't in the march. He stood with his sign for people to read, and it was, my girlfriend or wife aborted my child without my knowledge and consent, and I missed my child. This was this many years ago, and the look on this man's face, simple, rough, homemade sign, was one of the most powerful things I saw that day.
Wow.
Because he was still very much in pain, and it said volumes. So I don't care what the weather's like or how many people are here. You can just walk around taking photos or asking people what their story is, and you'd be amazed what you will learn.
Well, Lisa Bourne, thank you very much for being with us today and sharing a little bit of your day with us. I know it's going to be a very busy day for you today, but we're going to keep an eye out on LifeSiteNews.com for all of your reporting on that. And thank you again.
Ed Morrissey, thank you for having me.
Have a great afternoon, Lisa. Thanks.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Coming up next, No, I do not want to upgrade Skype at the moment. Coming up next will be Dustin Siggins, our good friend, sometime guest blogger. As soon as I can I have to be able to read the phone number there. Dustin Siggins is also from LifeSiteNews.com. In fact, he's the one who helped set up the partnership today. So
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Siggins. I didn't realize we were on a Mr. basis here, but all right. Dustin Siggins.
Oh, excuse me. My dear friend Edward, how are you on this fine snowy day?
Oh, on this well, it's sunny out here in Minnesota. I don't know what your problem is, Dustin.
Oh. You know what? I love the snow. I'm looking forward to it. I was sliding on purpose on the sidewalk 2 nights ago. And then I fell, so that was less fun.
You can get away with that when you're, young and in good shape. You get to be middle-aged like I am, and when you start to slide, it's nothing but bad. Nothing but bad, Dustin. I'm telling you that right now.
I don't know. Being from New Hampshire, I've learned that if you're walking and you slide, you're going backwards. If you're moving a little faster, you're going forward. And at least you have a chance to catch your balance.
Well, there you go. I'll have to try to remember that. I've been out here for 18 years, and I still haven't figured that much out. Goes to show you.
I'm not a physics major, and that is outside the purview of my job. That is not the LifeSite News official position on sliding and walking on sidewalks.
Do not do this at home.
Exactly.
Exactly. All right. So today is the March for Life. We've got this great partnership with LifeSiteNews.com, and happy to be doing this because I definitely want to shine a little bit more light on, as much as I can, on pro-life issues. And you've been working on this, and obviously this gets a tremendous response. Somewhat muted this year because of the blizzard that's coming through here right now, but still tens of thousands of people are turning out for this thing. And social media is playing a more and more important role in that, Dustin. Tell us about the social media aspect of March for Life organizing and who it's reaching.
Well, I can't speak directly to that because it's not been what I've been focusing on this week, but every organization, every event is having their own hashtags. And it's been really interesting to see how pro-lifers, Joe Stanek, who I'm sure you're familiar with, told me a couple of years back that pro-lifers always went on Twitter. And if you can't be at March for Life, we about 6 people to D.C. 2 of them had to take off early this morning, John Henry and Ben Johnson. They both took off early. And a lot of other people did the same thing. A lot of other people canceled. That's why it was tens of thousands, but still smaller than normal March. So social media is playing a huge role, not only in promoting events generally and raising awareness, but it's also playing a huge role so people can feel actively involved and be actively involved and promote life. Someone was holding a sign here today. It was I forget what the website was, but it was encouraging people who are religious to do more than just march.
Right.
I mean, their last of their 4 big signs that they had said something along the lines of, is this the only pro-life thing you'll do this year? And I think a lot of people, they tend to think, and I'm certainly guilty of this, where it has to be big or it's not worth it. And that's definitely not true. Because if you have 1 million tweets, that's extremely valuable, especially because a lot of the mainstream media doesn't cover this. Mainstream media doesn't cover this kind of event. And so it really provides a media perspective that allows you to feel and be involved. There's a whole lot of benefit to using social media.
Oh, I always try to. There was actually a reading that was one of the mass readings not long ago, and I'm trying to recall exactly the reference because I'm not necessarily the greatest at that. But
sure,
it was one of the gospel readings, and Jesus was talking to people about salvation, and the question was, well, how do we prepare ourselves for salvation, or how do we, and he says, if you're a tax collector, just don't cheat.
Yes.
If you're a soldier,
Yes.
just don't exploit people.
Right.
You're not called necessarily. Not everybody is called to do, superhuman things. You're just supposed to be in the roles that you have in life and your callings. You're supposed to do it right, and you're supposed to do it well. And so that's something to keep in mind. There's a certain humility to this that, well, if I can't be the top person at doing this, it's probably not worth doing. That's absolutely not true.
Well, and especially because there's several things there. One of which is it's a very, as you pointed out, a very mundane attitude. It's focusing on the here and now and what's it called, the prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
But secondly, my father actually, start with Dad, I'll go to Mom in a minute. Dad is a serial entrepreneur. He has a new company called Cape Cod Gutter Monkeys. We clean your gutters so you don't have to. And he's expanding it across New England. He's franchising it. And Dad once told me years ago that if he does more good with 12 employees when he owned his roofing and construction business than any politician, because he's directly educating people, providing money, food, roof over their head, helping their families. He does more good for any politician, for the world, than any politician. And I didn't really understand that for many, many years. Likewise, my mother, she worked at a nursing home and volunteered at a different one over a period of 5 years. She didn't help thousands of people.
Right.
She helped 16 people every day. And the conclusion of her help was, you're going to die, but I'm going to make it as best as I can for you. So this has been a real lesson for me as a millennial in politics, where it's very, an entitlement generation, really focused on self, to really kind of sit back and observe, two people in my life who don't worry about their status. Instead, they're just worried about doing what they think is best and right and what fits their personal desires and needs to feel internally happy.
And again, I think that's what you see here with the March for Life. You have, on an individual basis, a person goes to Washington, D.C. and marches down the street.
Right.
That's not much, but it's something. The difference is that when you act collectively, you have 100,000 or 200,000, depending on the year. Maybe not this year,
sure,
of course, because of the blizzard. But you have it makes all of those little individual contributions adds up to a very large whole. A very large effort, and that is what I think the key is. And social media is great for that.
And social media is only great for that, but used properly. And I'm actually far less active on Facebook the last few weeks. I just got kind of burnt out on the, less beneficial aspects of social media. But, the useless debates and things. But I really, I'm looking outside right now. I'm actually at the Alliance Defending Freedom's D.C. headquarters. They had a little reception after the march.
Yep.
And I'm looking outside and it's snowing. There's going to be buckets of snow, as much as 30 inches possibly, record snowfall for D.C.
Right.
People came here anyway, and as you said, they marched because it was right, because it was what they felt they could do to promote the cause. And I saw one person, I forget who it was, I think it was just someone I walked by when I was taking photos of the march, said, some people say you can only come if it's really big. He goes, no, the point is to be here and do what's right. And that's what, I guess last year there were, 5 million women who were, according to, the CDC, I think it was, in 2014, there were 5 million women who got pregnant in America. And 1 million of those babies ended in or were killed by abortion, and 4 million were born, give or take.
Yeah.
So 4 million women made individual decisions to bear life. That makes a very strong collective change or difference versus if, let's say, 4 million women individually decided not to keep their children.
Yeah.
And so the impact is tremendous, as you've said a couple of times now, even if you don't necessarily see it. And part of that, I think, is a trust in God. Part of that, is that He will do good with what we do. And I think part of it is a recognition that most people want to do what's right.
Yes.
I've observed, many people, I'm sure you've seen, they don't look behind them when they're going through a doorway, right?
Right.
Make sure that there's no one behind them. But if you say, hey, can you hold that door? 99% of people do it. Most people want to do what's right. The question is, are we a little too absorbed? Are we a little too self-centered? Do we just need a little reminder, a little push in the right direction?
Speaking of which, a little push in the right direction. I picked this up off of LifeSiteNews.com. There's a picture that's gone viral, and I asked Dustin to talk about this a little bit, because this is a couple that's trying to give other people a push in the right direction by offering up a very interesting testimony. Tell us a little bit about the picture and what the backstory on this was.
Yeah, so my colleague John Jalsabat caught this at Live Action News, which is another pro-life news agency. I run part of the Live Action group run by Lila Rose. And so we put it on LifeSite News, and as my colleague John pointed out in the article that he wrote, the couple went for an abortion, and they ended up changing their mind. And so they did just kind of like, I think it was a man-on-the-street interview, basically, for a minute or two. Nothing real spectacular was said, except that, we went in, we changed our mind, we walked out. And people were just reacting to it. People were really reacting strongly to the idea that someone considered abortion and then decided not to. And some people might say, I think there's validity to saying, well, you should, it shouldn't be praised for not killing your child. But when that's the basic thing of, being a mother. On the other, I say that as someone who's never been pregnant myself. But on the flip side, with so many women getting abortions done, the idea that she walked in and then walked back out, I think says a great deal about this woman's understanding and her husband's understanding of what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a human being. That's why I can't mind read as to why people have jumped on this story, but like you say, it just went viral. It's gone everywhere. And it shows that, even with today with social media, a little story like that was a Man on the Street interview can really make a difference and empower people.
And I think it encourages other people to tell their stories about the tough choices that they faced, and people who have made the wrong choice and who realized it later on tell those stories. And people who've made the right choice talk about the fear and the anxiety that they went through and the struggles that they went through. We were just talking with somebody, I think it was last week. I think it was last week while I was on Relevant Radio, talking about that as well. And sometimes you're in a bad position. The choices aren't all great, but there's one that's really bad, and there's one that is life affirming. And I'd say that all of these stories have value, and I would say that the ones that especially have value are the ones that really demonstrate how abortion is sold as on a fear basis, they're selling despair is basically what it is.
Right.
And I think those stories that tell that story, that express that, shine out as a sort of a beacon of hope. Don't buy into this. Don't buy despair. You don't need to buy despair. Buy hope.
That's a really good way to put it. I've never heard it put quite that way. And you're right, because the abortion industry says you can't do it, therefore let us, quote, solve your problem, so to speak.
Right.
Whereas the life movement says what is the answer to the question, what is the value of life? The answer is in the question. Life is valuable on its own.
Right.
I saw a lot of science today saying life is something like life is precious no matter what size it is. Well, I think that also applies to what size it is. That applies to age. That applies to ability. Whether you're disabled or not, all life is valuable. I'm sure you're familiar with Timothy Carney.
Yes.
The Washington Examiner columnist.
Yeah, great columnist.
He's a libertarian Catholic. Mostly focuses on good government, corruption, and in both parties, things like this, Corningism.
Yep.
He wrote a really great piece 3 or 4 years ago now. His 14-month-old nephew passed away from some illness.
I remember this, yes.
It was a really powerful piece. And I think a lot of your readers would be drawn to tears by reading this, because Carney doesn't come out and say, hey, this is the value of life from an abortion perspective or from anything like that, from a moral perspective. He just says, look, I think hundreds of people, I believe, came to the funeral for a 14-month-old kid. I think it was his sister and his brother-in-law, learned the value of, getting closer to each other through a difficult time. And he only had 800 words, and it was just such a powerful piece.
Yeah.
But again, 3 or 4 years later, I still remember it. I actually went back and read it like a year ago just to remind myself, because it was just that good.
I remember this.
And so, go.
No, I was saying I remember it too. A very powerful piece, yes.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of times, obviously I'm a data person. I think it's great to use logic to win arguments, but at the same time, we're also emotional creatures. We're also creatures of relational creatures, spiritual creatures. So it's great to have stories like that really connect on multiple levels. Because there's two kinds of personal experiences in my admittedly limited experience in life. One is the kind that's relevant to you and nobody else. The other kind is one that transcends you and really connects with the human condition. And I think Tim's piece, Carney's piece, really did that several years ago when it came to the, talking about the value of life with his 14-month-old nephew that passed away.
Those are the stories. Those are the stories we need to tell. And Dustin, we're out of time, but thank you for your contribution earlier today, by the way, at hotair.com.
I'm glad you liked it. I know it was a little bit of an aggressive piece. And let me just say...
What, you aggressive? No.
I know it's so not
So
my
unlike
style in
you.
the slightest. I'm usually so conciliatory.
I know. It's so unlike you, Dustin.
But let me just say quickly that we really appreciate partnering with you for this show. LifeSiteNews.com is the world's top pro-life, pro-family daily news website, and we know that that Hot Air is so pro-life. So we're very glad to work with you guys and promote life on the Day of the March for Life.
Well, I'm happy to do it. I mean, I was happy when we were able to put this together. So, congratulations on all the work that's being done over at LifeSiteNews.com. I'm tied into that, and Dustin, if I wasn't, you would beat it over my head until I was tied into it, because you're not
aggressive.
aggressive.
Now, I'm subtle with lots of finesse.
You
know that, Ed.
You are not aggressive in the least, Dustin. Well, I see you at
Ed.
Am I going to see you at CPAC this year?
Oh yeah, actually, we're a co-sponsor for the first time. We're at CPAC.
Oh, that's awesome. Well,
So
I'll
we're,
be there.
We're hoping, keeping my fingers crossed, that we're going to get somebody on a panel talking about how to talk social issues, how to not to be Todd Aiken. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. Pretty sure we're going to have somebody talking Planned Parenthood. I'm pretty sure we're going to have somebody talking about religious liberty, possibly on the main stage.
Excellent.
So we're working really hard now.
So if you aren't already signed up for CPAC, that's another great reason to sign up for it. So Dustin Siggins,
Yes.
LifeSiteNews.com. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and move on and give Ryan Baumberger a call, our final guest for today. Let me go ahead and make sure I've got his number here. Ryan is from the Radiance Foundation. We're going to talk to him about the Radiance Foundation as soon as we get him on the line, because his story, I think, is a great one to end with, because it sort of contradicts a number of memes. I'm all about contradicting the memes, as you know.
Hello, it's Ryan.
Ryan, hi. This is Ed Morrissey from the Ed Morrissey Show, and we're on the air at the moment. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it today on the March for Life.
Absolutely.
So you are the head of the Radiance Foundation, Ryan. Tell us about the Radiance Foundation and what it does.
Sure. The Radiance Foundation is something that my wife and I started a few years ago. We're a life-affirming organization that loves to illuminate how every single human life has irreplaceable intrinsic value. And we do that through creative ad campaigns. We do that through our multimedia presentations that we do across the country. And we do that through our compassionate community outreaches, where we reach out to birth moms who choose adoption over abortion.
Now, you have a particular story to tell. You have a particular walk through life that is deeply impactful on this conversation, Ryan. I was hoping that you would share that with us.
Sure. I mean, you could say I'm the 1% that's used to justify 100% of abortions. I'm the friend example that even sometimes pro-lifers have a difficult time embracing. My birth mom, my biological mother, was raped, and yet she chose to go through 9 months of a traumatic pregnancy. And it's really amazing, because I'm that tangible example of what happens when a singular decision is made, and you see reverberations for generations after generations. So she made a loving plan of adoption. I grew up in a multiracial family of 15. I have 12 other siblings, 10 of which, all 10 of us are adopted. And I grew up in a family where most of us would have been written off by the world, saying that we were unplanned, so therefore we're unwanted, therefore we're going to be unloved. And it's all a lie. I mean, my parents shattered that myth of the unwanted child. And today I'm happily married, 4 kids, 2 of which are adopted. And, that powerful singular decision of my birth mom allowed me to be loved and now to love. And so it's why I do what I do, and I love defending human dignity. Because regardless of your circumstances of how you came to be, because none of us have control of that.
Right.
Every human life has value.
Every human life has value. And so when you hear this discussion, because I was just talking about this with Dustin here, Dustin Siggins, right before I called you. And he's talking about they're going to be at CPAC this year, and they're hoping to be on a panel that will instruct people how to talk about social issues without coming across sounding like Todd Aiken, who is sort of the, the reductio ad absurdum, I guess, of conservatives who don't handle it competently. But there is a problem with pro-life conservatives who want to shy around this particular point. And it is probably difficult to argue this because it is a moral dilemma on one hand to say, well, are you going to tell this person who has been, who's been traumatized already that she has to go through with the pregnancy? But I think we're approaching it from the wrong direction on this. Would you agree with that?
I think so a lot. I mean, a lot of these situations, particularly when talking about the pro-life issue, it's simply the problem is people are coming from a point of unawareness and definitely not knowing how to address it. And any time pro-abortion activists will always bring up rape, and it seems to silence the conversation. And I encourage people, don't be silent about it. I mean, the fact that most people don't realize how many women who go through the horror of rape, which I wish we would focus more on punishing the rapist instead of the child. But they don't realize that a lot of them actually choose life more than most people would expect. So you're talking about 47% choose life. And I think those stories are worth listening to. Those stories are worth hearing. And what I find, because I travel so much and I hear from rape survivors who have chosen abortion and those who've chosen to parent, and as well as those who've placed for adoption, the theme that is the same with them is that the child is the only thing that is redemptive, the only redemptive part of that traumatic experience. And that is the same, whether they've chosen abortion or not. And I think that is worth hearing, but mainstream media doesn't ever want to convey that part of the story. And that's why I feel like my life just shows that there's another side to the story. I'm not trying to force anybody to make any particular decision, but I'm here to say that there's more beyond that pain and confusion of that moment.
And here's why I think it's so important to hear these stories. I mean, yours and all the other stories about choosing life is, I truly believe this, Ryan. We are not going to win this battle legislatively. You can't win a battle legislatively until you've won it culturally. You have to educate a culture about when life begins, when life really begins, scientifically when it begins, and also on the value of life. And as I was saying to Dustin, on the bankruptcy of despair, because that's really what we're talking about here, is selling despair as an option when it doesn't have to be. Your mother had hope, and that's the reason. Your biological mother had hope, and that's the reason why she had you. And that's what we have to. That's the formation that we have to present to the culture. That's how I feel about this, and I think that's what the Radiance Foundation is actually doing. I mean, you guys are on the ground and doing this.
Absolutely. I mean, and we work hand in hand with a lot of pregnancy care centers, there are thousands across the country. We've helped to raise millions for these centers. And you talk about sources of hope. I mean, to be quite honest, I'm half black, half white, and I deal with this issue even when it comes to the racial aspect, which is a whole other topic of conversation.
Right, yeah.
But I look at the pregnancy care centers as the Underground Railroad of today. It's a place of rescue. It's a place of respite. It's a place of hope and healing. And they are the only ones who are there. They're walking through this whole experience with these young women, many of them who've been abandoned by men. And I'm a father. So I'm really passionate about encouraging men to be men and step up to their responsibility. Because for me, fatherhood begins in the womb. That's when your involvement needs to start, and that's when your involvement needs to start there, but it needs to continue. And so these pregnancy care centers are great sources of hope because that does change everything. It changes everything. Whether you're a man or a woman, you get a little ounce of hope. It transforms you.
And I agree. I mean, we've seen that out here with pregnancy care centers that are trying to operate in the shadow of these, large Planned Parenthood abortion mills, and are doing heroic work, sometimes under, plenty of duress, and certainly without very much in the way of credit, especially from the media and the popular culture. So, Radiance Foundation and other groups as well, of course, are doing this kind of work to also, to fund these operations so they can continue on. But I think also in part too, Ryan, is just is moral and spiritual support so that the people who are doing these things can carry on.
Absolutely. I mean, we are people in need of one another. I mean, we don't live lives in isolation, and that's where we're called to be a community. And when someone is hurting or someone's in despair, no matter what the issue is, we should always be coming alongside of them, supporting them, walking them through these difficult times. And that's why having support in the case of an unplanned pregnancy makes a world of difference. I mean, it literally is the difference between life and death. And that's why churches should be coming alongside, individuals should be coming alongside. And there's so many ways to support. I mean, I know I grew up in an environment, obviously, where parents supported not just the adopted children they brought in, but young single moms. My parents brought single moms into their home and took care of them and their children. And this is the kind of community that should exist, that we don't say, hey, the only possible solution to life unplanned is death. No, the solution is I'm going to step in and I'm going to be here.
That is it. So how do people help the Radiance Foundation? What can people do to help the Radiance Foundation?
Well, you can go on www.radiance.life and look at all the original creative content that we produce and share that. We engage in a lot of citizen journalism and do thousands of hours of research to just educate the public about what the issues are and share that. Don't be afraid, and share it on Instagram, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook. There are lots of ways that you can support the work that we do, and what makes us most gratified is when we see people sharing this content, sharing the truth, because heaven knows mainstream media is not about sharing it. So that's the best way to support what we do through the Radiance Foundation.
Well, Radiance Foundation, radiance.life, L-I-F-E, is the website. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so check that out. Be sure to go over there, see how you can help. Ryan Bomberger, thank you so much for being with us today and telling us your story and the story of the Radiance Foundation. And best of luck to you. Hope that we can talk again soon.
We'd love to. Thanks so much, Ed.
Thanks, Ryan.
Appreciate it.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up at this point in time. I want to thank LifeSiteNews.com for partnering with us today on this special edition of the Ed Morrissey Show. And I want to thank the folks who are in the chat room. Cranky T-Rex, running the chat room, as always, at Cranky T-Rex on Twitter, crankytrx.blogspot.com. Also want to thank the folks who are in the chat room. We're going to kind of run through this a little on the quick side here, but because we're going to go ahead and just get going here. I'm going to try to pump up the music. We'll do this while we're talking through the music. Breck Nichols, Fausta from faustasblog.com, Great Western Hemisphere blog. I read it all the time. And of course, she is also a firm pro-life blogger. My sister's brother, T. Rand, all the people who have been watching the show and who will watch it on the podcast version when it goes up at hot air in a few minutes. I want to thank you for watching the show today. We'll be back again on Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the West Coast, where we are here Tuesdays and Thursdays, most Tuesdays and Thursdays anyway, from 4 to about 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you haven't tuned us in before, tune us in soon, and we'll see you then. Until then, have a great weekend, and don't miss a minute of the Ed Morrissey Show.